My name is Sarah Abbott. I'm an ELA and Social Studies Learning Coach with the Noble Flex program, and we are here today at the Berwick Library to participate in an event with veterans. So some veterans share their stories with our students, and they were able to ask questions and learn a little bit about their experiences.
I think we're ready to start. Welcome to the Berwick Public Library. I really appreciate your teachers and your enthusiasm to come out today and talk to veterans. Throughout history, our history, European history, any history of modern civilization, there has been conflict. And in conflict, humans have to stand up and make tough decisions. And decisions like that can be very personal. And when you look at these fine people or any veteran from our town, from anywhere, those people made decisions that put other people before them. And they decided to serve their country, no matter what country that is, in dangerous, confining. Their life was put on hold so that we, in the United States, can enjoy a democratic system. And that means you all have a voice. But before you make choices and vote for things that are going to affect you, laws, anything, you have to remember what these veterans stood for when other people wouldn't or couldn't. And when you're thinking that way and you're learning about history, this is an opportunity to think back on these discussions and your questions that you had and the answers to them, because these are real people. And they are part of our history. They're part of our democratic system. And these are really our heroes. So you guys are so lucky to have the opportunity to talk to them. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Bryan English, the commander of Post 79 in Berwick of the Legion. Thank you, Bryan.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really great to see everyone. Anyone who has a veteran in their immediate family, father or raise your hand. Well, thank you for your service. Being a military brat's not always easy, I know. But welcome. It's our pleasure to be here. As Sharon said, I'm the commander of American Legion Post 79. The American Legion is an organization of veterans, for veterans, and also for the community. And we have scholarship programs available and other things. So get some more information about the American Legion. I highly suggest getting in touch with us, and you're welcome to visit one of our meetings. We generally meet the first Tuesday of the month at the town hall, except for June, July, August, when we take off and play in the summer, just like you guys. I'd like to introduce some members of the American Legion and our staff and everything. Colonel Rosanne Martin, stand up, please. United States Air Force, retired.
And
Retired command. Oh,
no, go ahead.
Command Sergeant Major Anthony Cincotta. He's retired from the United States Army. And Paul Amatucci, and he was United States Air Force. I'm not sure what rank.
Yeah, I was a buck sergeant.
So we have some questions here. After we break up, I have some displays with some pictures of my service. There were some questions about the aircraft that I work on. I have a model of the airplane right here. So to answer some of the questions that you have, for me, first of all, Bryan English. So, what is the scariest war that you have been in and why? So, the scariest, I had a couple of crazy incidents, but the scariest time actually for me was when I was in Korea during the midst of the Cold War. And in Korea, the wars never really ended in Korea. And in 1983, a Korean airliner known as KAL-7, KAL-007, was shot down by the Soviet Union fighter plane over the Sea of Japan. on that was actually, I did not know, a friend of mine who was a Korean War orphan who had become an American citizen. There was also a United States congressman on board of that plane, and all people on that plane were killed. But at the time of the incident, the United States USS Midway Carrier Task Force Group, which my squadron was a part of, the combat air group for that, was sent to cover the rescue operation, and the Russians, the Soviet Union, did not want us investigating because they denied shooting it down, and it became an international incident. During that time, for about a short period of time that seemed like forever, we thought we were going to a full-scale nuclear war with the Soviet Union. The pucker factor on that was very high. Nuclear wars are not a good thing, and we were loading up bombs to go to war with a world power that had nuclear weapons. So for me, that was the scariest time I ever faced personally. Fortunately, it de-escalated, and for all of us. My favorite place that I was stationed, being in an aviation unit, I got to travel a lot of great places, but I have to say I love Denmark. It was beautiful country, the most beautiful place I've ever seen. I didn't spend as much time as I did in Japan, Philippines, and Korea, and some other places, but Denmark, absolutely gorgeous, and had a wonderful time there. What drove me to be in the military? I grew up in the South. My father was a World War II veteran of the Army Air Corps, which was a predecessor to the Air Force, and in that I always decided that I wanted to serve our country. I joined when I was 17 years old and knew that was really what I wanted to do, but joined the Marine Corps because I wanted to outdo my dad. My favorite plant, so on my bio it said I was a gardener, so favorite plant, oh wow. I guess, believe it or not, it sounds crazy, but I love growing beans, because beans are great. I love green beans, man, they're one of my favorite. But I grow asparagus too, and we're eating asparagus. It's already coming in, and absolutely love asparagus. Aviation ordnance technician. What does an aviation ordnance technician? So this is a picture of an F-4 Phantom. These are the aircraft that we had a pilot and a backseater called a RIO, Radar Intercept Officer. And if you look on this later, you'll see some missiles that are on the plane. These are depictions of the Sidewinder missiles. Those are air-to-air missiles. This plane is capable of carrying over 24,000 pounds of external stores, things that go boom. So ordnance is all the stuff on there that does the dirty work of blowing up stuff. So what I did was worked on the missile systems, worked on the bombs, and the rockets and gun pods and everything else that is also some of the defensive countermeasures like chaff and flares, which are used to avoid attacks by other aircraft on the aircraft. So I loaded bombs, built up the bombs, worked on the missile racks, worked on the things that helped maintain that aircraft. Did you feel your life was in danger at any point? I had a number of incidents where I definitely felt like I was in danger, mostly in accidents. I was severely injured in an accident in Japan. Slipped on a maintenance stand. You'll see a maintenance stand depicted on that, and tore my leg up. I've also had fires on aircraft that were loaded with bombs, and had 2 people in the plane. I had to go defuse bombs while it was on fire. That's scary. I had to literally unscrew fused bombs because the time that they had between going off was very short compared to the bombs themselves. So I was literally clipping arming wires and defusing the bombs that were ready to go. There was over 40 or 50 aircraft loaded with fuel, loaded with munitions. Then if that fire would have spread, there would have been a big hole. Really, really big hole, the size of Berwick. My proudest moment. It's an interesting question. I think one of the proudest moments was actually when I graduated from boot camp at Paris Island. 3 months at Parris Island, Marine Corps boot camp. I think even my compatriots in the Army and Air Force will admit Marine Corps boot camp is a very special thing in and of itself. And going through that, and the day that my drill instructor said, "I'm going to be the first one to call you a United States Marine," I'm still proud of that. Did I meet any famous people? We had a number of people. My last duty station was at Andrews Air Force Base, where I was on the anti-terrorist team for the facility, and at the time that was where the president's plane was. Ronald Reagan was the president back then. I'm showing my age. In the 1980s, and we had a Undersecretary of the Navy flying with us. We had dignitaries on the base and everything. So I met, quite a few people there. One of the Secretary of Navy, Undersecretary of Navy was one of our pilots. He was in the Marine Corps Reserve and flew with. My middle name is Dean. Someone asked my middle name is Bryan Dean English. And then the last question, I really appreciate this question. I don't know who wrote it. I may ask for a hand on this one. How can we help veterans? Who asked that? Nobody want to raise their hand? No. How can we help veterans? Well, one of the things that I think is you can do to help veterans the most is just honor their service. But when I say that, I have a lot of people that will come up to me and say from time to time, "Thank you for your service," and stuff like that. And sometimes, it's sort of taken back because it becomes like just something that people say. Sometimes I'll stop them and ask them exactly what do you mean by that? Because a lot of the stuff that we had to do was very difficult. And one of the things I think that we could do to help veterans is create a world where we really don't have to go to war anymore. And no one dislikes war any more than someone who's served. And we've seen the effects of it. And whatever that means, what you can do for your community, what you can do for each other. We live in a world that's very divided. And I think one thing that we can do is to help veterans is let's get to the point where we live in a world with peace with one another. Respect our differences. We're never going to agree. You're never going to get a group of people to agree on anything. We have different political beliefs. We have different philosophies. But I believe in the right of free speech. I believe there's consequences for saying things out of line. But we should allow speech. We'd allow people to express their views and to realize and understand that just because somebody might disagree with you and see things a little different, that doesn't mean that they're bad or that you're right or they're right. But respect their views, because that's really ultimately what we went to do, was to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And so I'd like to thank you. One of the things I was going to do, then forgot to do as we got started, was to say pledge allegiance to the flag. So if you'll stand, if you don't mind, would like to do that. My apologies for not doing that at the beginning. But if you can put your hand over your heart and do the pledge allegiance, hand salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, folks. So, thank you.
Before you move on, I know the students got your bios, but could you just repeat your service, how long you served?
Certainly.
You came out, so other people watching this.
Certainly. My name is Bryan English. I served in the United States Marine Corps. I went from basic training. I graduated from high school May 26, 1980, and was in basic training at Parris Island on June 2nd. I did not waste any time. I joined the delayed entry program. I served on active duty in the Marine Corps until 1988. Got out and missed the military, missed being on active duty. I joined the Marine Corps Reserve, served in the Marine Corps Reserve with Bravo 125, Manchester Marines. They were in the Gulf War that went right through the wire, through the minefield under artillery fire. One of my squad was the one that actually cleared the minefield. I served on active duty with the Actually, it was detailed into recruiting, where I served in the United States Army Reserve as a recruiter in Fitchburg, Mass. So I missed that little joyride in the Desert Storm. But my guys went through there, the guys that I trained with. Then I got off active duty in 1992, was discharged, and so I served a total of 10 years, 3 months, and 22 days on active duty. And even though I'd served in both, once a Marine, always a Marine. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Colonel Rosanne Martin, United States Air Force, retired.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to follow the same format that Bryan did and start with your questions, and I thank you for that. The first question is, where did you grow up? And I was born in Newport, Vermont, and it was very close to the Canadian border. As a matter of fact, when I first started school, I didn't speak any English. I spoke just French. And it's a great place to be if you can't be in Berwick. The second question is, why did you join the Air Force? Because I was a native of Vermont, I really hadn't been anywhere and done anything. And I had never been outside of the state. I had never flown on an airplane. And I decided that since my father was an Army veteran who served in Korea and also in Germany, that it would be a good thing to do to join the military for maybe 3 or 4 years, get some experience, see the world, and then become a civilian again. And so that's why I decided to join the Air Force. And the next question is, how did you tell your family that you wanted to go into the Air Force? I kind of did a little bit of homework. I joined the military when I was in college through the Reserve Officer Training Program. And news of that made the local newspaper. And a lot of people that knew my parents came up to my parents and said, we're really sorry that your daughter flunked out of college and that she joined the military. Well, they didn't realize that the Reserve Officer Training Program is a program where, as you're in college, you take a special course and you go to a summer camp to learn more about the military during the summer, which was awesome because up until that point in time, I'd never left the state. I had not flown on a plane, so I got to fly from Vermont down to Alabama, where they do not speak English, I have to tell you. It was very challenging. It was very challenging for me as a Yankee because they draw out their syllables so long. But anyways, so it wasn't hard to tell my parents that I was in the military because my dad was in the military. I have a cousin who now lives in Canada who's a Marine. And while I was in college, I took the opportunity to do a little bit of homework. I checked the Navy. Their standards were too high. I couldn't make it in the Navy because at the time, the recruiters were looking for college people who had PhDs. And I was working on a degree in biology, of all things. And so I checked out the Army, and I didn't even bother with the Marines because I knew I just didn't have what it took. And I did check out the Army and Army ROTC, but the thing that seemed to be a fit for me in 1976 as a woman who was getting ready to graduate college was the Air Force. And that turned out to be an excellent choice. All the services now have so many more women as members than they did back in the day when I first joined. But it turned out to be a very good choice. And we must have liked each other, the Air Force and I, because I stayed with them for 27 years. Let's see. The next question. Do you have your pilot's license? I'm really glad someone asked because sometimes people think if you're in the Air Force, you must fly. And the truth of it is, probably the coolest job in the Air Force is to fly and fight for a living. But there is a lot of pride to be had from being one of the people, like Bryan, who, and Paul actually, who support the people who fly. And it's really hard you may not think of this on a day-to-day basis, but there are a lot of people in the world that support the pilots that fly and fight for a living, including people here in North Berwick. Because when you think about it, Pratt & Whitney, what do? They make aircraft engines, right? And they are right now making the aircraft engine for the Air Force's latest fighter, the F-35A Lightning fighter. So you've got people right here in your town that are supporting the pilots that fly and fight for a living. And as I said, I've never had any regrets about not being a pilot. I like flying, but I don't want to be in front. I'd like to be in the back of the plane. And I have had the opportunity to fly in an Air Force trainer. But for the most part, I'm just really proud of the work that I did. The career field that I went into was military intelligence. So I know a lot of secrets, but I can't tell you any of them. And I've never been, one of the questions you asked was, were you ever wounded in action? I've never been in combat. And part of me feels badly about that, but part of me feels that while I was in the military, I did my best to make sure that the people who were in combat had the information they needed to stay safe. And that was basically my job for 27 years. My favorite location, I guess it would have to be Germany, because my husband Ron and I were in Germany twice, and it was just this great opportunity to work with not just people from my service, but people in other services as well, and people from services in other countries. Ron and I have been married for many years, and Ron has followed me. I met Ron in college. He went to St. Michael's College. I went to an all-girls college, and my ROTC program was at an all-boys college, conveniently located just within walking distance. So we met in college, married shortly after college. We have no children, but we have each other, and he has followed me and helped us through at least 12 different moves from overseas back to the United States to various different states. And so if I have had any measure of success in the military, it's truly due to my husband, Ron. I think that fixed just about everything, except there was one question: how many people typically fit in a jet? As a general rule, the fighter jets are single-seaters, except for the trainers, which may have room for the instructor. And the jet that I mentioned to you, the F-35A Lightning, is a single-seater. So what you see on, I think when you watch Tom Cruise, there really isn't anybody in the back. He's in the front, and that's pretty much it. So I want to thank you for your questions and for being here today. And hopefully, if you'd like, afterwards we can chat. If any of you have any specific questions, we can talk a little bit more. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker today, Command Sergeant Major retired Tony Cincotta, United States Army.
Thank you, Colonel. How about that, Colonel? This young girl behind me was a bird colonel in the Air Force. I want to say one thing: there are very few jobs in the Army, and I can say that after doing 25 years, that men do that women can't do as well, if not better. Remember that, girls. All right, I grew up in Berwick. I'm actually from the Commonwealth. I hate to say that. But at the age of 18 months, my father and my mother, who was from Canada, moved to Berwick. I went to school in Berwick. After I like to tell everybody that I was in the top 10 of my high school class, but I don't tell them there was only 11 in the class, which is true. In 1952, I graduated from high school, and the Korean War was going on. And I think there were 5 boys and 6 girls, so all the 5 boys joined up for the war effort. I can speak for the people who are here as veterans, as well as myself, that we considered the military, or going in the military, the rent we paid for the privilege of living in this country. Do you understand what I'm talking about? You really have to go overseas someplace like I did and see what they live like and what the world is like for them. And you will really appreciate, no matter we have problems, I know that, but there's no place that's any better than the good old USA. All right, some of the questions. What was your favorite part of being in the military? Well, it was a chance to interact with other people from other parts of the country, chance to travel. I think that was the big thing for me. What was your least favorite part? Being away from your family. It's if you're married, and it's a tough life if you're married, I'll tell you that from personal experience. And I have been married 68 years. I'll be 90 next year. So it's a tough life if you're married, but it's not impossible. It's a chance to see the world if you can. What is your favorite weapon? Well, I don't think you probably ever heard of it, but it was when I was in Vietnam, I carried what is known as a Swedish K, which is a submachine gun. And it was really good. Saved my life. Tell us about your skill in marksmanship. I wasn't that good. I mean, I was all right, but I wasn't that good. What skills did you gain in the military? I think that the big skill I meant was to learn about leadership. Do you understand what that's all about? Leadership. Being able to be responsible for men and women's lives who depend upon you to get them out of a tough spot. I was with the Special Forces. Anybody ever hear of the Special Forces, the Green Berets? Well, I can assure you, it's tough. What award are you most proud of? Well, I'm going to say the Good Conduct Ribbon. And the reason I say that was because when I was your age, I thought everybody was entitled to my opinion. But the Army changed all that. Experience in Korea. I got to Korea when it was just about over. In fact, I got there in March and it ended up in July. Really didn't do much. I was a radio operator, and then after everybody left, I was sent to Japan for the next couple of years. What was your experience in Vietnam? Well, that was different. I spent 2 years in Vietnam. And sometimes I wonder why we were there, but irregardless, it was very hot. Spent a lot of time sleeping on the ground. Did you ever do that? Not good, especially when it's raining. What is the most common misconception about the military? Well, everybody feels about the military, everybody feels a little different about it. Like I said, I thought it was a good deal. I know it was a good deal for me. Like I said, I wasn't the best behaved young man at that time, but when I got into the Army, I hadn't much choice. I had to be behaved, and I did. What is your favorite place? I think, like the Colonel said, I like Germany, I like Europe, I like, let's say, Germany, Luxembourg, Belgium, Holland, France. They're all nice places to visit. As far as the most annoying insect, down in Panama, I spent 3 years in the Republic of Panama in Central America. They got all kinds of bugs, and snakes, and armadillos. I just can't think of the name of this bug, but it was really bad. And if it got onto your skin, it was like a tick. You all know what a tick is?
Yeah, we all know what a tick is.
Stay away from those. Anyway, that was one of my worst things I had. What is the strangest thing you've ever seen? That's a little difficult for me to answer. I saw buildings being blown up. It looked like little matchstick boxes, and I just couldn't believe it was happening in front of me, but it did. I think so. And do you like cornbread? Who asked that question? Fine. That's a good question. And I do. Thank you.
I would like to add to this self-effacing behavior, and he did not say that he was command sergeant major in the Special Forces. Only less than 1% of the people who ever served make that rank sergeant major. Elite company right there. Paul Amatucci. Paul Amatucci, Vice Commander. He's my loyal help.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love this. It's a great forum, and it's nice to see all you here. You know, I thought we'd have about 7 or 8 people, and, you know, we got a nice room full of people and a nice group. So I want to start out by saying that I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. And being a Brooklyner, there are a lot of people that I had no idea existed in this country until I went into the military. And you meet people that you never would have met in civilian life, and they're from everywhere. They're from Texas, they're from Wyoming, they're from Montana, they're from California, they're from everywhere. And that's one of the best things about the military. It's kind of that big melting pot where everybody comes together, but guess what? We're all Americans. And that's really what counts. So here I am, I'm this kid from Brooklyn, and I go through a chow line, and they had this white stuff swimming in a bowl, and I had never seen a grit in my entire life. And all of a sudden, they're pouring it all over my scrambled eggs in the morning, and I'm saying, what are you doing to me? You know, but they do what they do. So I learned to love grits. To this day, I love grits. So, you know, that's one of my favorite things about the military is I learned grits. But you know, going through the questions here, you know, it's, you know, I take a look at these people and I say, you know, compared to them, I was a draft dodger. I mean, I didn't do what they did, and you know, there is no stronger credential for the military than Tony Cincotta. This is a man's man. So. And he will have my undying respect. I did make it to Vietnam, and that was an interesting time, both politically and personally. But going through the questions here, how did you feel about the Air Force, and did you like it? I actually love the Air Force. The Air Force, as I said, gave me the opportunity to meet so many people and to really understand that the mission is just not what Colonel Martin said. You know, you fly the planes, you get in dogfights, you drop bombs, and you're Top Gun, and that's great. And God bless those people, and I love them. And we wouldn't be where we are today without them. But there are so many people that support them, and I happen to be in the medical corps. And they trained me to be a medic, sometimes called a corpsman. And what I did in the Air Force was amazing, because I have never told anybody this, but I'm going to tell you. I used to faint at the sight of blood. When I was a kid, if somebody cut their finger or something like that, I'd look at it and bam, I was gone. So fainting at the sight of blood is not really good for someone who's looking at combat injuries. So I got over that real quick, and thank God I had a real good combat nurse that I worked with, Major Hester, and she took me aside one day and she said, "I get it, I understand it. I'm going to get you through it. And she did. So God bless Major Hester. She was unbelievable. So, so how old was I when Vietnam happened? Well, Vietnam was going on, and I was in college. I was in college, graduated college in 1967, high school in 63. So, so it was a while ago. But when I got out of college, there was something back then called the draft. But like Colonel Martin, during college I was in Air Force ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, and but what happened? I had an accident prior to graduating in my senior year, hurt my shoulder real bad, couldn't pass the physical, the final physical, so I didn't get my commission. So I said, hey, I've got all this time in with the Air Force anyway, I'm going to join the Air Force. So I did, and never looked back. Loved it, loved the people I was with. But yeah, it was 1968 when about 6 months after I graduated college, that I entered the Air Force. And you know, in my bio, we talk about me studying psychology. Why did I study psychology? I was just interested in it. I was a business major, really, studied economics, but I had to have a minor, and my minor was psychology, and it was just totally interesting. And as things happen, when I was in basic training, they start counseling you on what area you want to go in. And when I was in, you know, I had told them about my degree, and they said, you know, there's a psychiatric clinic at Woodford Hospital in San Antonio where we do basic training. And they said, you should go over there and talk to them. And I did. And they liked me. And then they kind of tracked me to go into the medical service. But when you go into the medical service in the military, that's a big catch basin. And you all take a look at it, you go into it. And when I was trying to get tracked into something psychological, psychiatric, but you have to go through the medical courses. So I got shipped out of there. I go to medical training. Then I get shipped to my permanent duty base, which was in California. And from there, they gave me on-the-job training. But there was no psychiatric clinic in the hospital I worked in. So I worked emergency. Here's a guy who can't stand the sight of blood, who's now working in emergency. So that was cool. Thank you, Major Hester. And then I wound up helping in surgery, so it all worked out. So it said, do you feel as though your experience in the military was worth it? Oh, yes. I wouldn't be the person I am today without having served in the military. I mean, it was really, it was life-changing. You know, we all live in this little bubble of our friends and our family and our community and that sort of thing. And when you get out of that bubble, as Colonel Martin talked about, and see the world and see other people and live with other people, have completely different experiences, it opens your eyes. So I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Can you describe the setup in the jets where you were treating patients? So what I did was, I was never stationed in Vietnam. I do have a Vietnam ribbon, but it's because I was in country in Vietnam, but only days at a time. Because what we would do is we'd fly out of California, Travis Air Force Base in California, and we'd go to Clark Air Base in the Philippines, where there was a huge military hospital where their wounded were treated. We'd stay a week, 10 days or so. We'd make sure that the group that we were going to transport were able to be moved. We'd put them on the planes, and then we'd take them back to the States, where they were distributed to hospitals close to their homes. So they would go all over the country to hospitals where they would further their treatment, but close to their homes. So we would go to Clark Air Base, but on about 7 other occasions, we would go from Clark into Vietnam, get wounded from Vietnam, and bring them back. Sometimes a stop at Clark, other times just direct. So, and direct meant we usually stopped in Hawaii. Never really got off the plane, unfortunately. You went to college to study psychology and economics. What was your original, what were those degrees before joining the military? I always felt that actually, when I was in Air Force ROTC in college, I wanted to be a pilot. So I took the pilot navigator test, which is not an easy test, but I passed it, and I was qualified for pilot training. So I planned on doing that, and the courses that I took were just courses I was interested in because I needed my degree to be an Air Force pilot, so I knew I wanted that. And I just took things that I was interested in. So I liked economics, so I majored in that. And then psychology was very interesting to me, so I did that. But, you know, it was, I figured I'm going in the Air Force, I'm going to be a pilot, I'm going to fly, and then I'm going to do my 20 years, I'm going to get out. Some big airline's going to hire me, and I'm going to be an airline pilot. Well, I'm telling you, I was never an airline pilot. So what happened was I got injured, so I couldn't get commissioned, and only commissioned officers fly jets. So I wasn't an officer. So when I went to basic training, because the standards were lower to just get me in as an enlisted man than they were to be a pilot. So although I got washed out medically, to be a pilot, I didn't tell them when I got in that I washed out as a pilot. So they said, well, if you have a college degree, so maybe are you interested in flying? So I said, oh yeah, sure, that'll be fine. So they gave me the test again. I had to take the big pilot test again. Fortunately, I passed it. And so they said, that's great. So everybody else is going to go and go to their permanent jobs and duty stations all over the world. You're going to stay right here in San Antonio, Texas, until your class opens, because now I got to go to officer training school first, and then become an officer, and then after that, I have to go to pilot training. So they started describing the length of process. It's I think it was 16 weeks in OTS to become an officer, and then after that you go to pilot training, which is 1 year, and then after pilot training you then go to specialty training when they decide what aircraft you're qualified on, and that'll take another year, and then after that you have 8 more years of actual duty that you owe the Air Force. And at that point I was saying, all I'm going to be doing is waiting. And when you're young, you don't want to wait and you're anxious. So I said, the heck with this. I don't want to be an officer. I don't want to be a pilot. Get me in the medics. So I did. So that's how I got there. So, life is strange. I have no regrets not being a pilot anymore, although I was dead set on it when I was younger. So that was interesting. Last question here is, you went from studying economics and psychology to working in the military and doing medicine. So basically, I loved medicine. I loved it, and I was good at it once I got over that blood thing. But and I really had a great affinity for patients and helping them. So they were trying to talk me into going to medical school as sponsored by the Air Force. They thought that since I already had my degree, I had the experience, they would pay for my medical school, which sounded like a great idea. until my wife had twins. And at that point, I said, you know what, I think I need to make money right away. So after I got out of the service, I went into business. It was great, had a great time, but you know, now in my 70s and taking it a little easier than I used to, but have no regrets. And I have great respect for everyone who served. Just briefly, last thing I want to tell you is my family is a military family. My father was in World War II. He was at Anzio, he was at the Bulge, and he was the first group that liberated a concentration camp in Germany. First ones. And he never once talked about any of that. I had to read a book to find out it was his unit. So, that's why, you know, the military is important to me. My brother was career Coast Guard, and he was at the Cuban Missile Crisis and was part of the blockade against Russians bringing missiles into Cuba. So that's my family's background. Thank you very much.
General questions? Or? So we have a few minutes. Thank you for each one of the presenters. I work with some really great guys, and there's a lot of other veterans down there at our meetings, and would love to meet you guys. So we have a few minutes, and then we'll break for some snacks, and you can meet with us individually. I have some pictures. Believe it or not, I was actually young over here, and I have some pictures of that. You can take a look at the plane. Just be careful with that. And there's pictures on both sides of that. I have some pictures of the actual aircraft I worked on, and some places that we slept in tents and stuff. Well, like he was talking about sleeping on the ground. It's you don't know what it's like till you literally have a rat crawl over your sleeping bag. Yeah. So, you guys anybody ever seen MASH? I'm a little old, but you guys, yeah. All right, you guys, MASH is still out there. You know how they tent and all with mud and everything? Yeah. Really? Right there. Yeah, and it got muddy. Yeah, yeah, that was us in Korea. All four of us, Command Sergeant Major?
I have a question for this fantastic group. Is there anybody out there that's thinking about the military? Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow.
All girls, how about that? Yay!
That's what I'm talking about.
Well, let me tell you what, you'll do well.
Thank you, sir.
And when I went into the military, I was getting $75 a month. And my daughter said to me one time, "You mean a week?" No. You know what they get today to start? Just to start? $2,200 a month. Anyway, I'm glad to see that you're thinking about it. The country needs it. We really need people to go into the service. And I'll tell you what, you can get so much out of it. So much out of it. Thank you.
So any questions that you have for any of us? Don't be shy. Nobody? Yes?
Ralph?
Tell us why you all joined the American Legion?
What's that?
Each one of us?
In general.
Why we joined the American Legion? Okay. Paul?
Yeah. I know why I did. And I know why I joined. I know why I did, and I know why I joined this post. First of all, you may know or not know, when veterans get together, they don't sit around and tell war stories. That's not what we do. And it's only in weaker moments that that veterans even talk about their experience, except, maybe a funny incident. My father in World War II, the only story he ever told me was about liberating wine cellars in France. That's what he talked about. So, but I found out later, He had a Bronze Star and a Silver Star, so he did some stuff. So, but the American Legion is a group of veterans who seem, we're people who understand each other and have a common experience, but we're also dedicated, completely dedicated to our fellow veterans. I have the honor of being on the honor guard in our post. The honor guard in our post actually goes to military or funerals as a military honor guard. We shoot the rifles as a rifle salute to the dead. We play taps, we fold flags, and we give military honors to everyone who served, who's being buried. So we do that. But we do everything in the community, whether it's scholarships, going to college, or community events that we put on. We're always out in the community. And for me, I'm there because this is my way of giving back. And it's very meaningful to me. And I think all of us feel that way. We want to give back. We feel indebted to this country and to our experience. And we want everybody to know that. And personally for me, why Post 79 in Berwick is more important to me than going to any other post is that when you get to a lot of these posts, they're all about being social with each other. And although we are social with each other and we love each other and we're great with each other, we're really so laser focused on our community and doing the best thing for our community. And that's why I joined the American Legion.
Well, I've been in the American Legion 51 years. So I think it's a good idea to be community orientated. When I was a young man, the Legion post here in Berwick was made up of just a few World War I and World War II veterans. Really wasn't too organized because they didn't really have a lot of money. Today, our post, thanks to some people who have done a fantastic job of fundraising, we have a lot of money. Recently, we gave a young girl, $500 or something. She's going to Washington to do something, school. So if you need any money, come and see us. And as Paul said and the others said, getting together for camaraderie and also to take care of our needs. In this country, the wheel that squeaks the loudest gets oil first. You understand that? In other words, if you want to get your agenda pushed, you get into an organization, whether it be the PTA or the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, but as far as veterans goes, the reason we have a fantastic Veterans Administration is because of what the veterans have done. You guys must have some questions.
Well, let Rosanne answer that first question, and we'll come back to that.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I have a question as well.
You want to? Can you save it? We'll finish that first question. Let's just save that question. Why you joined the Legion?
Okay, yeah. Ron and I moved here from Colorado Springs, Colorado, which was my last duty assignment. And when we were looking at buying a house, we looked at several locations, and this one absolutely seemed the best. But we were brand new here in 2005. We had not lived in the area since about the early 70s when I first joined the military. And I have to admit that even after 27 years in the military, you kind of miss the people that you worked with. And there's an expression in the military, there's no I in team. I don't know if you've heard that before. But the wonderful thing about the military is the people that you get to know, that you get to work with. And I really wanted to I wanted to learn more about my new community of Berwick, and to learn a little bit more about the people that also served in the military. And I could not have picked a better post because the quality of people that that are in this community is unparalleled, and it's just amazing to be able to call them comrades and to just work with them every day. And it gives all of us such great pride to be able to be among you in the community, to get to know you and to support you. And so please remember that if there's things that you need, look to us for assistance. That's why we're here. And again, how many of you have military families? Okay, that's really amazing. And how many of you are thinking of joining the military? That's awesome too. Yeah, and those of and for everybody else, just remember that whether you're in the military or not, don't ever forget that there are people that you don't see who are out there doing the best that they can to encourage and support the people who are in the military, serving around the world every day. Thank you.
So I was hesitant for a long time and never joined the American Legion for some of the reasons that Paul alluded to, because my perception of the American Legion was just a bunch of guys hanging out at the bar, and and I didn't need that. But after talking to this gentleman right here and a few other guys, and a Marine buddy who's not here, but one of our post members, and he invited me to join the post and said, we meet at the town hall, we don't have a bar, and my eyes lit up because that's, I don't mind, I'm not judging anyone, or I have a drink every now and then, but it's not about, like he said, it's not about just hanging out and doing that. What it's about is the ability to serve others. And I was introduced to a great bunch of guys. And as far as helping veterans, this gentleman right here is our Veterans Affairs representative for the VA. I work for the Veterans Administration. I'm a nurse at the Somersworth Clinic, so I get to serve veterans every day. So I'm happy to do that. But my involvement with the VA, I can say that we get so much feedback at the VA that it is so much better than it used to be, serving other veterans. And as Tony alluded to, a lot of that has to do with the political action part that our organizations, the VFW and the American Legion, do to help the VA come along. Tony was instrumental in helping me to say, I never put in for injuries that I sustained during my military service because I didn't want compensation for it. And he said, Sarge, you're entitled to that, put in a claim for it. And ended up with a 90% service connection right now. And never, and my father served and was messed up in World War II, never got a dime. So what we can do for veterans is help them to get what they're rightfully due. If they're suffering, we have veterans suffering from PTSD, suicidal veterans. We try to help those. We have veterans that are eligible for compensation. We try to help them with that. That's one of the great things, is trying to help and it's about helping other families. We have scholarship programs. If anybody's interested in going to the University of Maine, it's one of the hardest scholarships that we have to fill. It's called the Stilling Scholarship. There's money available if you go to UMaine in Orono and graduate from Noble High School, and you can do the grades. You're eligible for that scholarship. I highly suggest applying for that. Put yourself, there's some stipulations, grade averages you need to, and you have to go to Noble, and you have to go to the University of Maine Orono for that scholarship. We have other scholarships available as well. But one of the things that I'm proudest of, having been commander, and I'm not the one who raises fund. Paul Amatucci did a golf tournament just recently, raised a significant amount of money. We support groups like these guys with the cameras here. That's Berwick Community Media, Terry Wright and Ralph. They're amazing, and they cover everything that we do, and they do so much for our community, and they record our stuff without charging us, and we're happy to be able to support them in a small measure, but it doesn't even compare to the amount of support that they do for us. But we try to help communities, but one of the things that I'm proudest of is, as Tony said, we raised close to $50,000 last year. And all $20,000 of that money was set aside strictly for helping veterans in our community. Think about that. We have $20,000 sitting there waiting for a veteran who needs it. And the rest of it goes to community service. We're going to blow those numbers out of the water this year. So I'm very proud. It's not about the money, but the money is about what we can do with it. So I'm very grateful that we're able to do that. And but the reason I joined was I found out this is a chance to do some service and not just, you know, hang around and commiserate. So, young lady, you had a question. What was your question, ma'am?
What do you all feel is your proudest moment serving in the military?
Proudest moment serving in the military.
You know, for me, I don't think it was in the military, but it was military related. You know, I got out of the service. It's in the early 70s, and I got a job on Wall Street in New York. So I'm working on Wall Street, and there was a guy who ran our service department in the company, and just happened to be talking to him, and he was a Marine in Vietnam and had gotten home severely wounded, and we just, you know, started talking, and we figured out that I was probably the guy who took him home from Vietnam with all those war injuries on one of my planes. So that hit me, and to this day, it's, you know, it gets me. So that's a proud moment, and I'm so happy that I was able to do that, because some of those injuries were pretty devastating, really devastating. And you know, he survived it, did well, and still a friend of mine. And but that's a proud moment.
Sergeant Major, proudest moment?
I think the proudest moment that I had was being a mentor to young people like yourself, helping young people understand what the word responsibility means, and also taking care of each other means. I think that was really made me feel good. I have a question though. Can I ask a question? What's the holiday coming up?
Memorial Day.
Thank you. Now, why do we celebrate Memorial Day, young lady?
To honor veterans.
Okay, to honor veterans and a little bit more? Why? I mean, we do that on Veterans Day too. So what is Memorial Day specifically?
To honor veterans and people who have served, who have passed away.
That's correct. Remember that. Memorial Day is not just the Indianapolis 500 and a barbecue and a car sales. It's to honor those who left this town and other towns and cities and never came back. Do you remember that? That's how bad wars are. Thank you.
My proudest moment in the military came kind of early. For those of us who work in the intelligence career field at the time, in order for us to be able to relate more to pilots, since we didn't fly ourselves, sometimes they would send us to training where the same kind of training our pilots had. And in this case, it was Fairchild Air Force Base, where we did survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training, SERE training. And part of that training involved going through an exercise where you became a prisoner of war, so that you had experienced that in a classroom setting, so you'd know how to respond if you actually were captured as a prisoner of war. They put hoods on all of us, and so we couldn't see where we were going, and they marched us into a shelter and let us take our hoods off, and everybody's looking around, and there were maybe 12 or 13 people, and we're trying to get oriented, and the first thing you want to know is who's in charge. Well, that was my question. I looked around, and I was with a group of amazing technical sergeants from the Air Force, and there was me, Lieutenant Martin. And turns out I was the one that was in charge. And so that was a very early introduction into what it was going to be like as a leader in today's military. But the proud moment came at the end of the several week period after that prisoner of war training ended. And they marched us all out, and we didn't know what was coming next. They had us all stand at attention, and behind us, they raised the American flag. And they had the American flag up, and it was brightly lit. And then they had us to turn around, about face, turn around. And there was the flag, and we were there. And the feeling that you just had to have been there, but the feeling of patriotism, the feeling of love for your country, of just being appreciative that you have the freedoms. You're not at war at the time. It just was really overpowering, and it made me realize that the choice that I had made to join the military was truly the right choice, and it probably led to my spending a little bit more than 4 years, but total of 27. But that was the proudest moment for me, was realizing what it meant to be an American and to be free in this country.
I think the proudest moment that I had, I would not have been working for the Veterans Administration had I not been in the military or been in the Marine Corps. I don't think I would have wound up there. But I think that the one thing that I can think of, like Paul, was after I got out of the military and I used some of what I had learned, and being a veteran really helps when I'm working at the VA clinic with veterans. To make a long story short, there was a veteran who came in, and I was checking him in to see the doctor, doing his vital signs, doing the preliminaries, just like if you go to the doctor and the nurse talks to you. That's what I do, in addition to drawing blood and all that stuff. So I noticed this guy was just tense. He was a colonel who had spent just come back recently from Afghanistan, who was a medical doctor who took care of patching up 101st Airborne guys over in Afghanistan. And so he was a pediatrician. He was patching up kids too that had hit IEDs, which are explosives. And so anyway, his blood pressure was through the roof. His heart rate was fast. And I stopped what I was doing, looked him straight in the eye, and I said, we're going to stop this right for a second. Are you thinking of hurting yourself or killing yourself? He started crying in my office, a full-blown bird colonel. And he said, yes. He said, I was planning on killing myself. So I said, we understand, we're going to help you, okay? We're going to get you some help. Got him in to see a mental health provider that day. And I'm going to take a quick aside. 13 to 14 veterans kill themselves on a daily basis, every day. You got a veteran in crisis, tell them, I care, call 988. That's a veteran's number, just as an aside, 988. But about a year later, he came, this guy, I got a text from him. I said, 24/7, you give me a call. You feeling it? You give me a call. This is my private phone number. You call me. I got a text from him that said he had never told anybody. It was the first person he told he was thinking of killing himself. He shot me a text and said, I told my wife. First thing he did. A year later, he comes into my office. He's a totally different creature. His blood pressure is low. He's stable. He's calmed down. He'd been making all his appointments. And he had a card addressed to him. He said, Bryan, I want you to read this. I said, well, this is addressed to you. He said, yeah, I want you to read it. And it said, Dear Dr. So-and-so, I want to thank you for being there to save our kid's life. He wouldn't be here if you hadn't taken care of him, triaged him, and gotten him down to Boston for the care that he needed. And this retired colonel looks me in the eye and said, this kid's here because I was there, but I'm here, I was there because you were there. And that's nothing for me, but that's simply because I was a veteran that I was able to connect with this guy. And that's one of the reasons we're there for each other. So if I don't do anything else, that's cool. That's the one thing that I have to say that I'm proudest of. And not that I did anything, but other than getting him in touch with people who could do something. So anyway, we're getting close to the time for we're going to be wrapping up, Sharon.
Well, I just want to thank you all for coming and hearing stories that you might not have had a chance to hear otherwise. And I want to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to hear the stories too. This is a time we can, if you have a question that's specific for one of our veterans, please feel free to come up and talk to them. We have refreshments. We talked a little bit, Mr. Cincotta talked about patriotism and Memorial Day, so we put together a little packet for you to take and maybe remember the day. But most importantly of all, when someone put in their questions, what can we do for veterans? To me, that person who asked that question, and as groups you put them together, you're already doing it by saying that, because we all just want to be aware and we all want to support people that have given so much for us and our country. So you're doing a great job just by being here, and thank you. And thank you all for being here. Some goodies, some refreshments, and feel free to come up and see them.
Our students are grades 5 through 8, and they participate in our program, which is kind of a program that is separate through Noble Middle School, and it's for students who want a non-traditional learning experience. So our students work on projects together. The projects are interest-based, so the learning happens organically. We're able to hit the standards by focusing on their interests. And we also do place-based learning, which would get our students out into the community and involved in the community, which is an example of why we're here today.